They say life slows down after 40. That the excitement, the thrill of being seen, truly seen, fades into the background. Maybe they're right. Maybe that's why I never noticed the emptiness creeping in, until he made me feel something again. Before I begin, make sure to subscribe for more stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew. I should have known better. I should have stopped it before it even started. But when you're lonely for so long, even the smallest kindness feels like a lifeline. Luke wasn't supposed to be anything more than my son's best friend. I watched him grow up, saw him and Daniel kicking a football in the yard, laughing, being reckless like boys their age should be. And yet, one night, in the simplest of moments, everything shifted. It started with a broken chair. A ridiculous, frustrating thing that had been wobbling for weeks. I was home alone, trying to fix it myself, when Luke walked in. "Need a hand, Sophie?" His voice was easy, teasing, as if calling me by my first name wasn't strange at all. I didn't correct him. Maybe I should have. He crouched beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin. His fingers brushed mine as he steadied the chair, and for a second, neither of us moved. My breath caught. It was nothing, I told myself. A trick of the mind, of being too tired, too lonely. But then he smiled, and there was something in his eyes, something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I had ignored before. The way Luke lingered a little longer when he visited. The way his eyes held mine just a second too long. And worse, the way I responded. I caught myself checking my reflection before he came over, smoothing my hair, making sure I looked nice. It was harmless, I told myself. Just a silly little thing, a leftover habit from the days when I still felt desirable. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something had been awakened inside me. And I wasn't sure I had the strength to ignore it. The first time I caught him looking at me that way, I told myself it was my imagination. A foolish thought, nothing more. It was a Saturday, and Daniel had invited a few friends over. The house was alive with noise, laughter, the clinking of glasses, the distant hum of music playing in the background. I was moving through the crowd, clearing plates, when I felt it. A gaze lingering just a second too long. I turned, and there he was. Luke. His eyes met mine across the room, steady, unwavering. He was talking to someone, laughing even, but his attention was somewhere else. On me. My pulse quickened. It was nothing. Just a look. A harmless look. I told myself that again later when he followed me into the kitchen, offering to help with the dishes. It was a routine thing, he had done it before, plenty of times. But that night felt different. As I wiped my hands on a towel, Luke leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You deserve someone who sees you." I froze. His words weren't casual, weren't playful. They were deliberate, piercing through me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I should have laughed it off, should have told him he was being ridiculous. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because for the first time in years, I felt seen. That night, after everyone had gone, I lay awake replaying his words. I was being ridiculous, making something out of nothing. And yet, the next day, when my phone buzzed, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. "Luke, can I tell you something crazy?" I stared at the message for too long before replying. "Me, that depends." How crazy. And just like that, a line was crossed. It started with harmless messages, simple, fleeting conversations that filled the quiet moments in my day. "How was your morning? Did you see that game last night?" Innocent words that shouldn't have meant anything. But then, late at night, when the world was quiet and my defenses were down, the messages became something else. "I like talking to you. You make me laugh more than anyone. Sometimes, I think about you when you're not around." Each message chipped away at the wall I had built around myself. Then, one afternoon, as I stepped into the living room, I caught him watching me. It wasn't a glance. It wasn't subtle. It was an intensity that sent a shiver through me. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt charged, thick with something unspoken. Panic surged through me. I turned away quickly, forcing myself to busy my hands, to create space where there was none. I avoided him for the rest of the day. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't escape the truth. Something had shifted. And there was no going back. I had to stop this. Whatever this was. For days, I forced myself to keep my distance. No more stolen glances. No more lingering conversations. No more late-night messages that left me breathless. It was for the best. I kept repeating that. But the more I tried to push him away, the more he seemed to pull me back in. That evening had been particularly exhausting. Work had drained me, and the silence of the house felt heavier than usual. Daniel was out with friends, and for once, I welcomed the solitude. I stepped into the backyard, letting the cool air wrap around me. The night was still, the world momentarily quiet. And then, I heard his voice. "You're overthinking it." I turned, my heart lurching in my chest. Luke stood at the edge of the patio, hands in his pockets, watching me with that same quiet intensity. "Luke, you shouldn't be here." "Why not?" His voice was calm, unshaken. "Because you've convinced yourself that feeling something is wrong?" I swallowed hard, shaking my head. "This isn't right." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, suffocating in the best and worst way. "You deserve someone who sees you, Sophie." The way he said my name, it was different. Not casual, not playful. Like he had been waiting to say it just like this. Then, he reached for my hand. Just for a second. It was the softest touch, barely there, but it sent a shockwave through me. I felt alive. And that terrified me. I pulled away quickly, my breath uneven. "I can't," my voice faltered, but he didn't push. He simply nodded, as if he already knew what I was feeling before I could even admit it to myself. Then, he turned to leave. That's when it happened. The back door swung open. "Daniel." He stepped inside, stopping short when he saw Luke. His brows furrowed, confusion flickering across his face. "Hey, man. What are you doing here?" Luke hesitated for only a beat before answering. "Just needed some air." He said it so smoothly, so effortlessly, that Daniel didn't question it. But I did. Because as Luke left, I realized my hands were shaking. This was getting out of control. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone lit up with a message. "Luke, I meant what I said. You deserve to be happy." I stared at the words for what felt like forever, my fingers hovering over the screen. This was dangerous. Reckless. So why did a part of me want to reply? I was at war with myself. Was this just a fleeting moment, a foolish indulgence? Or was it something deeper? This had to end. I had spent the last few nights wrestling with my own thoughts, trying to silence the feelings I never should have allowed to grow. Luke was young. My son's best friend. This wasn't just wrong, it was reckless. So, I made a choice. I ignored his messages. I avoided him when he came over. I forced myself to smile and act normal whenever Daniel was around. Even when my heart clenched every time I saw Luke looking at me from across the room. I thought I was doing the right thing. But then came Daniel's birthday party. The house was full of laughter, friends, and music. I had been busy hosting, making sure everything was perfect for my son's special day. And then, in the midst of it all, I felt it. That gaze. I turned, and there he was. Luke. Standing in the kitchen doorway, watching me. I should have walked away. I should have ignored him. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself moving toward him, as if drawn by something beyond my control. "Are you really going to pretend this isn't real?" he asked softly. His voice was low, just for me. The weight of his words sent a shiver down my spine. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, Daniel called for me from the other room. The moment shattered. I forced a smile and turned away, leaving Luke standing there. But inside, my hands were trembling. That night, I sat in bed, staring at my phone. I started typing. A long message, explaining everything. Telling him we couldn't do this. That it had to stop. That I had been foolish. But before I could hit send, my phone buzzed. "Luke, I understand. But if you ever feel alone, I'll be here." My chest tightened. I put my phone down. I told myself it was over. Days passed. I kept myself busy, pretending life had gone back to normal. Until one evening, when I heard a knock at my door. I opened it. Luke stood there, eyes searching mine, his presence undoing every bit of resolve I had built. "Luke, you shouldn't," I started, but before I could finish, a voice behind me cut through the air like a blade. "Mom, what's going on?" My heart stopped. I turned slowly. Daniel stood there. His face was a mixture of confusion and something else, something I wasn't ready to see. I had been so careful. But in that moment, I knew. Everything was about to fall apart. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. Daniel's eyes darted between me and Luke, his confusion quickly morphing into something darker, realization. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is," he demanded, his voice shaking. I opened my mouth, desperate to explain, but nothing came out. What could I say? The truth was right there in front of him. Luke took a step back, his face pale with regret. "I should go," he muttered. He didn't even wait for a response before turning and slipping out the door, leaving me to face the inevitable. Daniel's chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. "How could you?" His voice cracked, pain laced in every word. "He's my best friend, Mom." Tears welled in my eyes. "Daniel, please. I never meant for this to happen." He let out a bitter laugh. "Never meant to? You think that makes it any better?" His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You lied to me. You betrayed me." "Daniel, no," he cut me off, his face twisting in anger. "You don't get to explain this away." I reached for him, but he jerked back like my touch burned. I had never seen my son like this before. The pain in his eyes was unbearable. He turned on his heel and stormed toward his room. I wanted to run after him, to make him listen, to somehow fix the damage I had done. But some things couldn't be fixed. The next morning, he was gone. He had packed a bag and left without saying a word. Days passed in silence. No calls, no texts. Just a hollow emptiness where my son used to be. I sat in the living room, scrolling through old photos, Daniel as a toddler, grinning at the camera with ice cream smeared across his face. Daniel at his first soccer game, looking so proud. Daniel on his graduation day, beaming at me from across the crowd. Tears blurred my vision. I whispered into the quiet, "I wish I could go back, but some choices can't be undone." And I knew, in that moment, I had lost something I could never get back. Sometimes, what feels right in the moment can cost us what we love the most. Choose wisely. If this story moved you, subscribe for more heartfelt confessions.